Hello and welcome to this screencast on cloud computing. My name is Pranav Surampudi and I'm here to demonstrate the basic services that cloud offers. We are currently in my AWS EC2 compute instance dashboard, EC2 dashboard. As you can see, I've already fired up a virtual machine on Amazon's cloud provider, and I'm currently connected to the Mumbai node because that's geographically closest to me. The first service that I'm going to be talking about is infrastructure as a service. So what's infrastructure as a service? So let's start by defining what infrastructure as a service is. Infrastructure as a service is a cloud-based service where the service provider gives the end user access to compute resources, whether they might be virtual, whether they might be physical, doesn't matter. End of the day, what matters is if the cloud service provider is able to provide some amount of compute resources to the end user. That's the definition of infrastructure as a service. So I'm actually running a T2 micro instance of a Windows server machine. You might not, I'll just switch to that virtual view of that machine in a little bit, but let me talk about the hardware for 1 second. So it has got a gigabyte of RAM, and you'll all see the specs there when I open up that. So it's got a gigabyte of RAM and very little amount of storage. But we can get task accomplished on that. Maybe running a small piece of server software that might not need uh, servicing that often, or that it isn't pinged and so often, and it isn't hit with a lot of information that it has to process. So let me just switch to the EC2 compute instance. So this is the EC2 compute instance that Amazon has provided me. As you can see, I have a gigabyte of RAM, and I have a both public and private internet port address, internet protocol address, IP address, and this is an 64-bit Windows machine. And as you can see, I can pretty much work with it anytime. So if I say I can run any type of commands on that, say if I have to run a Java program for that matter. So let me just do this. Okay. Let me demonstrate that infrastructure as a service is basically providing me with compute resources, right? So let's go to the desktop. Should command. Yeah, this is the desktop. Let me write a small Java program that says hello world to show you that uh, the compute resources have actually been allocated to me, and I'm able to perform some computations on that. Just bear with me for 1 sec. So we talked about computation, right? So let's run a small program that sums up the values from 0 to 100. Close the class and close this. Okay, let's yes, consider as and desktop Java. Let's say this. So we have sample.java here. Let's close this. So I say Java C space sample.java. Oh, see, Java C isn't configured. So let me just go ahead and configure that. This basically All right, let it be. So we'll talk about that later. I have a jar file with me actually. That runs. You'll get a gist of what's what when we go down the road. It's not so important that I run the program per se, but you get the gist, right? So that's infrastructure as a service. So Amazon has provided me with a finite amount of compute resources in terms of RAM and CPU and network. So I'll be using those in order to run a simple calculator program as a part of a different service. So that's the end of infrastructure as a service. Moving on, the second type of service that cloud providers usually offer is software as a service. Software as a service is a utility where the end software product, the final product, is delivered to the user over the cloud, and the end users are actually able to use software for computations or generate data or store data and do various things using this piece of software. What we have here is a simple calculator that we have written in an earlier course. So I'm going to run that calculator. It's a jar file that we have downloaded of the main machine using a simple FTP protocol. So when I click on this, take a few seconds to load up, and you can see that my calculator is loaded up. So I'll be distributing this jar file over the cloud. So if I have to perform addition, it's adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing, and taking the square root as well. So this is a simply fairly simple calculator, if you will, but the main thing to remember, the main thing that we can take away from this concept of software as a service is that the end program can be distributed. The final build that we do as developers can be distributed to an end user in the form of a jar file, in the form of maybe a Python executable file or a C executable file or a Microsoft installer. It doesn't matter. But if we are able to distribute and run that program off of a cloud network, that's the end of software as a service. And now we'll be talking about the last service, that's platform as service. Let me just quickly come back to the regular. Yeah, we are back at our Amazon dashboard. Let me go to S3. So Amazon S3 is a storage cloud where Amazon lets you store data in the form of buckets, and you can actually grant access to these files and host if you have a domain. Okay. So here I have a simple HTML file that I have written in the web programming course. So I'll be firing that up in just a minute. So when I click on open, here it is. So this is a small HTML file along with the CSS that I have written, that's appearing quite well, right? So thereby here platform as a service can be defined as the cloud service provider will provide the developers. This is exclusively for developers. So infrastructure as a service and platform as a service are both initially developed with developers in mind, but software as a service on the other hand can be either way. It can be helpful for developers because they can run some utilities and computational software that they require to generate the end programs like Android apps and web applications and whatnot. So that's that. And it also has a consumer facing facet whereby developers can distribute their software using SaaS. So this coming back to our regular thing. So this is platform as a service where it lets you host files, and if you have a domain, currently we can see that that's Amazon subdomain that we are trying to connect to. But if we have a domain, we can stitch it up that domain with this storage. Thereby we can make this our file server and connect this file server to our domain name, thereby Amazon is providing us with a platform to launch our end product. Granted that this is a simple HTML web page, but complex things like mean stack based web application using Node.js, Angular, MongoDB, and Express. If we have that kind of frameworks, Amazon is also a very great tool using which we can deploy applications. So that's about it. That wraps up the different services that cloud offers us as developers and as for end consumers. Thank you for sparing your time and listening to this screencast. Thank you.